Good afternoon. I'm Jessie Dykes with First Baptist Church Decatur, one of your stage captains for the day, and I'm so happy to be hosting y'all and for y'all to be here. A few announcements before the program begins. Also a good moment to make sure your cell phones are either turned off or on silent. Our authors will be signing books after the presentation. Volunteers are in the back and they can lead you to the signing tent. It'll be right out the church and take a left. Our bookseller for this session is Eagle Eye Bookshop. Books are available for purchase at their tent on the front lawn. Go out and support them. Lastly, the Decatur Book Festival is a nonprofit, and it depends on sponsors and donations to bring great authors to Decatur every year. Please consider making a donation to support this effort by going to the festival website at decaturbookfestival.com. Now, please join me in welcoming our panel. We have moderator Preet Singh and authors Danielle Allen and Ashley Herring-Blake. Thank you.
All right, you guys, we are starting this last panel by going a little bit rogue. So there have not been Q&A sessions in any of the previous panels because they've been depending on the moderators to, carry the conversation in a way that all questions get asked. We all read with different intents, and so there's no way that everything that I'm going to ask or the conversation that we are going to have is going to cover, everything and everything. So we are going to go rogue. We are going to talk for 30 minutes and then, have you guys ask questions. That being said, that means I'm going to be running around with a mic to get to you. If we can kind of come closer so I'm not tripping coming down the stairs. I know you guys are very comfortably seated, but it will definitely facilitate the Q&A afterwards. And if you're comfortable where you are, just don't laugh if I fall. Okay. I believe Jessie was going to introduce Danielle and Ashley, but she has left, so now you guys get to hear me do it. All right, bear with me. Actually, before I do that, if you would raise your hands, if you have read Danielle Allen before. All right. If you have read Ashley Herring-Blake before. Thank you. Okay. My work has been made a lot easier. Danielle Allen is a romance author, a professor, and a life coach. She aims to write contemporary romance novels that change the status quo of the genre. Ashley Herring-Blake is an award-winning author and teacher. She is the author of 6 novels for young adult and middle grade readers, as well as Bright Falls adult romance novels and the holiday romance Make the Season Bright. So the 2 books that we are talking about or featuring the most today are Curvy Girl Summer by Danielle Allen, which came out in June, I was close, end of July, and Make the Season Bright, which came out just this past Tuesday. Both of them are contemporary romances, which you guys already know. So I guess let's get into questions. And excuse me while I very frequently reference my phone. All right, Danielle, let's talk about your latest title. You have written 51 books, and Curvy Girl Summer is book number 51. Tell us a little bit about Curvy Girl Summer.
Curvy Girl Summer is my first traditional release, so all 50 others were independent. And
can we just have a round of applause for writing 51
Yes,
books?
that is amazing.
Thank you. And it was, for my first traditional release, it was important for me to have the heroine be fat and black and have natural hair because you don't often see that image as the heroine in romance. You might see her as the sidekick, you might see her as the best friend, but never as the heroine, the star of the show. So that is what I pitched to Bramble, and they loved it and wanted to move forward with it.
I love that. Ashley?
Oh, well, Make the Season Bright is a Christmas book, so happy Christmas, everybody, if you celebrate, or season. At the beginning of spooky season here, I'm still in my witch era, and yet I'm talking about a Christmas book. But anyway, it's a second chance romance about 2 childhood best friends who became lovers, who became fiancés, and then one left the other at the altar. It's bad. They're messy. And then they end up at the same house for Christmas because they're friends with sisters. Of course they are, because it's romance reasons. And they end up doing all of these fun, singles activities, like speed date cookie decorating and horseback riding, and of course they get snowed in. somewhere, and then things happen. So yeah, it's a fun holiday book. It's very angsty too. There's lots of hurt feelings that need to be repaired, and obviously wounds that are dealt with. So yeah, it's fun and cute, and I hope you like it.
I love that. I love that. All right, let's talk a little bit about characters. Can you tell us the names of your characters and kind of like how you came up with them, how you decided who they were going to be? I know Danielle mentioned some of the things that were really important to her.
Oh, me first?
Yeah, let's switch it up.
So the main characters in Make the Season Bright are named Brighton and Charlotte. And they are actually both musicians. And so I kind of came up with them. All my characters are always kind of based on me. Charlotte wears a lot of black and has gray hair. Because I was like, well, I grew my gray out, and I'm going to put that in a book, because we need to have our gray-haired lovelies in there, too. And they're both musicians, like I said. Brighton is like a singer-songwriter type of musician, which I was in a past life. She lives in Nashville, and I pulled a lot of my own experience in Nashville for her character. Charlotte is a bit more buttoned up, and she's a violinist, classical violinist, so I had to do a little research there, because I know nothing about classical violinists. It is definitely like a grumpy sunshine kind of trope, which is actually my favorite trope. Charlotte has a lot of trust issues, and so she's very reserved and buttoned up and outwardly very put together and successful, but inwardly just like, a complete disaster, which is my favorite kind of character to write. Brighton has her own issues. She's carrying a lot of guilt with her, also a disaster, but a little bit more warm towards the people in her life. And I just love working with that dynamic and that kind of grumpy sunshine dynamic and seeing how they end up, accepting love from each other and being able to love the other person as well.
Danielle, can you please tell us more?
So Aaliyah is about to turn 30, and she had taken some time to really just figure out what she wanted. And then she slipped up, and so that's where we meet her in chapter 1. And then after the events of chapter 1, she's like, okay, I don't want that in my life. I want something real. And so she is convinced to get on a dating app because she goes to a bar and the bartender's like, this is a disaster, you need help, and so why don't you get on this app? So she decides to do that. And you are on this journey with her as she is going on different dates and just different things that she goes through. All of the dates are inspired by true events. And so once you get through that trauma with her, you see how she gets to the point where she's like, all right, enough is enough. And then she, maybe she finds what she's looking for eventually.
I'm going to have to jump questions because you just said that some of those dates are inspired by true events. Are these events that happen to you, things that you read, things that happen to your friends? Because if you haven't read the book already, Aaliyah's dating experiences are wild.
So these events, so all of the men that she goes on these dates with were inspired by men that either I had talked to or one of my best friends. So these are straight from the group chat, guys. So these are, and but not all of the people we actually went and had a face-to-face interaction with. It's like maybe they said the things that they said to Leah on their date, they only said to us on the app. And then it was like, oh, okay, block. And then keep moving. But in Aaliyah's case, Aaliyah was already face-to-face with them when they were saying these shenanigans. And so yeah, real life trauma.
I'm in.
Wow. And Ashley, do you also take stuff from real life? Or
Yeah, I do.
How do you find inspiration?
I do. It just depends on the context and who and what and where. And I'm trying to think if there's anything from Make the Season Bright that I actually took from something that happened. But I've never been rescued by a hot woman on a horse that went rogue. So can't say that happened to me. So yeah.
Aspirations. We should always have aspirations.
Although I'm terrified of horses. I did take that. Brighton is terrified of horses, and then she gets on this horse and has to be rescued because it can sense her fear, which is, again, why I'm terrified of horses. And I've literally never been on a horse. So I did take that experience and put it into Brighton.
That's, yeah, I can understand. They are pretty majestic, but yes, when you're on them and if they go rogue, then yeah,
I
you
will
don't have
happily
any
feed
skills.
them carrots and apples. I'm just not going to get on one.
That's fair. Let's talk a little bit about the story itself. What would you say is the essential takeaway message or theme from each of your books? Like, what did you really want to get across to readers?
Don't settle. Figure out what it is you want and then go after it. Set the boundaries that you need, not just with significant others, but with friends, with family. Set your boundaries so that you can live the life that you want to live, and do not settle for anything less than that.
That's beautiful.
I heard an author a long time ago, is actually V.E. Schwab, Victoria Schwab, if you've ever read her. And she said one time that she heard from someone else, it's like a little chain, that authors are kind of constantly trying to address the same questions in our books, these core questions. And I think that's something that's pretty constant in my books is, am I worthy of love? And that journey of that you go through to realize that, yes, I am worthy of love. And so that's definitely present in Make the Season Bright. Under that umbrella is a lot of self-forgiveness, self-kindness, timing, that a lot of things are about timing in our lives. You can have someone in your life that you love and want to be with forever, but the timing is not right for you. Just because you love someone, you have to also make sure that your needs are being met in that moment. So self-advocacy too is kind of something that I touch on a little bit. And then just taking risks, love and being loved is scary, and it's a risk that we all take of being hurt and being left and being heartbroken and whatever it might be, but that those are risks that are worth taking.
If you were curious why these two authors and these two books are paired together for a conversation, you have your answer right here. It is really about finding love, believing that you're worthy of love, and it's just beautiful. So, yeah. Let's see here. What was the easiest part of the story to write for each of you? And I know you guys wrote these a while ago. If you aren't aware of how publishing works, it's typically about a year after the book has been finished being written that we see it on the shelves. It might even be more than a year. So they're already working on either the next book or they're 2 books ahead from where they were when this book initially released.
Yeah, my first event for this book, I was like, what book is this? What are we even talking about? I don't remember writing this book.
I'm working on book 3, so I'm wait, what happened?
I know, I'm like...
No, I feel the easiest part was probably just the dates, because they were remembering, if not what was said to me, what going back to the group chat and seeing our reactions to the stuff that was happening, laughing, and then writing it, because it was a mess, guys. It was a mess. And so to be able to relay that, and then to have so many people read that and feel I've been on that date. That was so important for me, because sometimes people will go have someone fetishize them or say something ridiculous to them, and they feel what did I do to deserve that? What did I do to make them feel like I'm whatever? And when they're seeing that, no, it's not you. This person is, trash. Right, so that's not, right. And so I think that having people being able to see that it's not them, see that oh, this is happening to other people too, I'm not the problem. I didn't do anything to deserve that. That has been really refreshing to see. And so it was easiest to write that because it was lived experience. And so.
I think for this book, I set it up to where they're going on these different singles dates, and mingling with, other singles in hopes of, I don't know, hooking up, I guess. I'm not sure what the goal is at singles events. Lots of different goals. But, so those were just fun because it was okay, well, let me think of the silliest, most Christmassy, holiday-ish thing I can think of and put that in this book. And so that is was kind of an external structure that I could work with, because I had a lot of very convoluted emotional stuff and the interior conflicts going on that I had that were very tricky. And so it was nice to have that external kind of, I think of it as the skeleton, and then all the emotions are like the innards and the guts, kind of holding it up so that I could dig deeper into the other stuff.
Ashley, do you find that writing the emotional guts, do you find that difficult? Because that was going to be my next question, is if what came previous was the easiest, what was the most difficult part?
I think that I, as an author, I've been doing it long enough that I understand my process mostly, and I know what I am good at and what I'm not as good at. And to me, I'm actually not as good at the external conflict. I'm like, can't we just have feelings and vibes? Because I feel like I am good at that part. I feel like I'm good at pulling it and tangling out these really complex emotions, and that's what I really like. This one was tricky because, to me, second chance romance is a little trickier because you have to convince the reader that these people have a past that was very meaningful, but then they've already been in love once, or sort of in some way, but then you have to also have them fall in love in the real time of the book as well. So it's kind of, you're writing it's almost like a now-then kind of timeline, even if you're not writing that kind of timeline. So it can be tricky, and this one was very, very tricky because Brighton left Charlotte at the altar, like literally just walked out on their wedding. And that's really not something that you would think would be easily forgiven.
Can't really bounce back from that.
Yeah, you can't bounce back from that, and she doesn't. And Charlotte is basically like, here's my middle finger, basically for a lot of the book. And so it was hard to tease out like a convincing forgiveness moment, and really understanding why Brighton did what she did. And so that was, tricky, but I enjoyed it. So.
Danielle?
The most difficult part for me was, Curvy Girl Summer is a slow burn. And I think what was difficult was being able to keep readers engaged and having them forget that the only burning that had happened was in chapter 1 and that it wasn't going to burn again until way later in the book. But because of all of the different things happening, it's like it makes the story move forward, and it is interesting enough that people forget until it starts heating up again, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, have we not had anything happen since then? So that was like the most difficult part, just making sure that it stayed how it needed to go.
You did a great job. Okay, so I got the warning that we've got about 15 minutes left. I have a lot more questions, but there's maybe 2 that I really want to get to, and then if you would please be thinking about your questions. We're going to open it up to the audience in a little bit. So you guys write romances. I think the most beautiful thing about romance currently, and I've been reading it for 30 years, is that there's literally love for everybody. There's so many voices, there's so many interests, there's inclusion, there's diversity, and you guys definitely write for readers who can connect with other marginalized communities. Why is it so important, especially in today's world, that you write these stories?
For me, I think that when you have society as a whole telling you that you are not enough, seeing yourself love and be loved is a powerful thing. And I think that it's important that other people also see you love and be loved, because I feel like it humanizes other people's perception of you. Because I don't need to see me being loved to humanize myself. I already humanize myself. But for other people to bear witness to that, because there are people who feel like, oh, because she's black or because she's fat, like she doesn't deserve love. And so when you're able to see it, then it's like, okay, wait. And it gives other people that opportunity to see that as well. So it is great for representation purposes for us to be able to see that, but then also for other people who may not have seen that point of view, seen that perspective, seen that side of things, to be able to see it and embrace it and then realize that, oh, wait a minute, they also love just like me. They also, and though you're unable to separate yourself from that person, that demographic, that sexual orientation, that race, you're unable to say, oh, we're so different, because we're not. And so that's why it's important for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think reading is like a key to empathy. It's how we step into someone else's shoes and really see what the world could look like, you know, through their eyes. I mean, I think that there's just so much, the world just feels very fraught right now. It feels even more fraught than it did even, 5-6 years ago. And I think these stories are, even more important now, just for everything that Danielle already said. With queer stories, I love romance and putting these stories out into the world because I think it is a wonderful, safe space for people to explore who they are and explore identities. I mean, I have readers talking to me all the time about this was the first sapphic book they ever read, and it, got them thinking about this or helped them understand that, or, about a family member or whatever it might be. And I wrote sapphic books for kids too, so like I've been seeing that in all ages, and it's just really amazing to be able to be part of that story and part of their story. And I just want to keep doing that. I want to keep putting more stories out into the world that help people understand, like Danielle said, not only other people, but also themselves. Because I think sometimes, especially when we're talking about queer identity, it's fluid. It can change, and I know mine definitely has over the years. And books have always been a safe place for me to explore that. And they were definitely the first touchstone I had to where I started thinking, oh, wait a minute, this kind of explains things that I've had or experienced in the past that I didn't have a word for, or didn't have an explanation for, or didn't have a context for. So I think that writing this kind of stories that I do, that's why I do it, is to just put more of that into the world as much as I can so that people have a safe place to land.
I learned a term this week called bibliotherapy, where it's literally where you teach yourself and you heal yourself through books. So, I've been doing it my entire life. I'm sure some of you have as well. Like, your stories are bibliotherapy. And yes, empathy is the most important thing that we can take from anything that we read, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whether you're reading for pleasure or you're reading because you have to for whatever purposes, work or school. Like, reading definitely broadens your horizons. And in today's world where external powers are threatening to control what we can read, control how we can read, please make sure that you are doing everything in your power to fight it. Sorry, I get emotional. Okay, we're gonna open it up to Q&A. Who has a question? All right, I see one hand.
Hi. This is a panel about contemporary fiction romance, and so I just wanted to know why contemporary? Why not fantasy or magical realism or anything like that? Like, why did you guys choose to stick with contemporary?
I love making stories about what could be happening right now. And so for me, it was just what real life shenanigans can I get these characters in? And so that's always been just what speaks to me. My favorite genre is really mystery. And so I love just being able to add elements like that into the contemporary space. But fantasy, I feel like when I watch it, I'm like, oh, this is intriguing. There's so many moving parts. You would have to build, in contemporary, you have to build a world, but in fantasy, you have to, there's a lot of things that would go into it that I just don't feel like that's me. I don't have that in me to build that type of situation.
Yeah, pretty much the same. I actually have written fantasy before. I started in fantasy years and years ago, and I wrote a terrible YA fantasy that no one will ever read, except all the agents who rejected me. And they should have. Because I used to
Did you build a whole world?
Huh?
Did you build a whole
I
world?
did build a whole world, and it was terrible. And then I realized that I don't like doing this, and so that's kind of why I landed in contemporary too, because I do like just dealing with and thinking about what could be now and what is real in our world today. I do like making up towns and building small towns because all of my towns are always made up. And someone was like, but that's world building. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have to figure out where my magic comes from. This is not, or a religion, I don't have to do that kind of stuff. So, and then with historical, I hate research, plain and simple. So.
Yes. All of that.
Okay. Hi, my question is, compared to 15 years ago and to now presently, what advice do you have for aspiring authors and what they should look forward to in publishing?
That's a hard one. I would say, first, write the book. I feel like a lot of people who say they want to write, they haven't actually written or they haven't finished what they started. And so write the book and then look for an agent, for a publishing house, look for things that align with what you want. But first and foremost, like, get the book written. So do that part, because that's the main hurdle. Like, write the book and then look for opportunities, because indie publishing is still publishing. Indie publishing is just as valid. And so you can go out there and you can put yourself out there, see if anyone wants to buy what you've written, because again, you wrote the book. And then after that, if you haven't had any luck, like with your fantasy, you can bring that back. You can publish it in an indie space.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, and I had a question the other day about like writing, like someone wanted to write a certain kind of book that they didn't really see much of in the market, and so they were concerned that like no one would want to buy it in traditional publishing or even read it in indie publishing. And like I know that that's a common fear with writers who are starting out. They're like, well, what if, I don't know about the market and the trends. Like, screw the market and the trends. Write the book that you want to write, that your heart needs to write, that only you can write. And there will be someone who needs that book. Like, publishing follows a trend that's already happening. And those trends are not set by publishing. Publishing is just lemmings following it. That's all they are. And it's a mess. So write that book that you want to write, and don't worry about, fitting into some kind of niche.
Hello. Oh, that's loud. Wow. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling to overcome creative blocks in their own writing?
Yeah, like creative blocks to me are a matter of an empty well. Like, you can't output to me if you are not inputting. So I would make sure, it depends on, what kind it is really. Like, sometimes it's like, I don't have an idea for a book. And that's like a big overarching kind of problem. And again, I would just say, take in creative things that you love and and figure out where you get inspiration. Free write. Let yourself write something really bad. Like, that's fine. Like, I know some of us have a little perfectionist inside of us, but a lot of writing is getting over that and just writing something crappy. Whenever I have blocks that are like within a manuscript, it's usually something that has gone wrong earlier in the book. So I always kind of go back to where it felt good and then figure out what the problem is there. But to me, like, the overarching problem when I feel like that is that I need to take a walk or listen to music that I really love or rewatch a favorite show or talk to writer friends. Like, writing community is huge in just dealing with the stresses of being a creator in this way. So that's some of my advice. What do you think?
All of that. And also, it depends on where the block is coming from. If you're stressed, it's going to be more difficult for you to write. If you are grieving or sad, it's going to be more difficult for you to write. So make sure that you are like doing what you need to do for yourself and that you're taking care of you so that then you can take care of business with writing. So if you are going through something, deal with that, let that simmer, and then go back to it. And it's okay to also take breaks from your manuscripts. You don't have to, sometimes it's not linear. For me, I write in a linear way. So I can't skip a scene and then write the rest of it and come back to it. Some people can. You might be one of those people. Maybe where you're stuck, if you can see other parts of the book, maybe you need to write that part and then come back to where you're stuck. But I wholeheartedly agree. Read it from the beginning and see where it goes when you're reading it. And then as a reader, if you are like, oh, this next part should be this, then write that part.
Anybody else?
I'm so scared. Danielle, I've read a lot of your books, and I really like the spice. And I know we're in a church today. So I just want to know how important pleasure is to you in infusing pleasure in your book, and how hard was it to temper the eroticism or the spice in Curvy Girl Summer?
Well, as we sit in the house of the Lord, I will say that it was, so Aaliyah is Aaliyah. Nina's journey is gonna be spicier because that's who Nina is. It wasn't that difficult for Aaliyah to go through her journey in that way because that's Aaliyah's personality. And so she isn't going to get pleasure from these men that she's going on these first dates with because the dates are terrible and also they didn't do anything to earn her. And so it wasn't that difficult to temper it for the story because that's the way the story went. Now with Nina's book, it's, you know, a different situation.
I think I started the Q&A early, but this is great. Also, yes, thank you for writing steamy and spicy books. They are excellent.
Ashley, it was interesting hearing you use some of the like romance tropes terms as it related to your novels. How is that integrated into your writing process? Like, are you thinking about that trope and then looking to execute it, or is it like, oh, look, here I am. I have they have to sleep in the same bed. Like, so how do those play? And I think like a secondary question would be, do you feel like you both are in like a dialogue with this like larger industry of these, you know, trends and changes in romance, or like it's just writing for yourself and you happen to be part of that like bigger romance trend? So I actually gave you two questions because I got excited.
I don't tend to, it really depends on the book. Sometimes, like if anybody's read Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, that's a fake dating trope, and I picked the fake dating trope before I wrote anything in the book. So that is one situation where the trope came first, but I usually don't do that. Like I wrote Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and at the end of the book, I'm like, oh, this is Grumpy Sunshine. And it's kind of same with Make the Season Bright. You know, with another book, there's a rivals to lovers thing in like a workplace kind of situation, and that just happened because that's the story I thought up. I wasn't thinking workplace rivals, you know, if that makes sense. But then some of the more micro tropes, you know, it's like, well, if I'm writing a Christmas book and they're at a ski resort, obviously there's gonna be a blizzard and they're gonna get snowed in. You know, just that fun stuff that we kind of, you know, expect and is like a comfort. And then, but I also love like switching it up. Like I love kind of subverting it. Like in one book, I think it was Iris, they go stay at this house and they're fake dating. So everybody in the house thinks they're together, but the person Iris is fake dating, her ex puts them in a room with 2 beds. So, you know, it's just kind of like switching it around, and I really like kind of subverting that kind of stuff. So what was your second question?
It was like, you know, you were talking a little bit about the wider trends in romance and how
Right.
like publishing is kind of following that trends that are happening,
Yeah.
you know, within people. But do you feel like there's a dialogue between you and the larger industry or your peers or publishing, or is it like, I'm just writing for myself?
Right. I mean, I think it's hard not to be influenced with what you're reading. You know, like if I'm reading a bunch of paranormal romance, I'm like, oh, I love these, I want to write one. You know, so I think that there's like influences that can come, but I'm always going to, I start from a place of the kind of story I want to write. Like, and, you know, and if hopefully that will fit into what my publisher wants to buy, or what readers want to read, because I can't spend 90,000 words of time with characters if I'm writing to a trend. I have to write something that like makes me happy and makes me, you know, to sound cliche, come alive, you know? And so it's like, and if it's not making me happy, if I'm bored, if I'm not loving it, then I'm gonna go back and fix it until I'm loving it. So, you know, I think that, you know, it's kind of a blend. Like I like to say, oh, it's 100% me all the time, but I live in the world, and obviously I'm influenced by things that are happening in media. But at the end of the day, it's gotta make me happy.
How about you, Danielle?
I think that for me, it has to flow naturally, and I can't force myself to write anything that's not coming from me. So if everyone, I remember a time when everyone was writing vampires, but that wasn't speaking to me, so I didn't write that. But if there was something that did speak to me and it'd be like, and an idea came to me, I can't say that I wouldn't, but like for the most part, the idea comes in my head, and then after that, I'm like, hey guys, this is what it is. And then I'll like know the tropes afterward, but it's really just what organically is coming to me, and then I write that.
Anybody else?
Hi. Have you guys read any good books lately? And if so, what are they?
So I have not been able to read anything because I can't read and write at the same time, because I feel like I don't ever want it to influence my voice. And because I've had to write back to back to back, the last book that I read, that I started, I haven't all the way finished it yet, but it's good, is called Somebody's Husband, and it's coming in December, so it's an arc for a book. The last book that I read that is out, I did a panel thing in Texas in a church with Allie Hazelwood, and I read whatever book she had that came out on the same day as Kirby Girl Summer. So that was the last complete book I read.
Bride?
No, it wasn't Bride. It was
Not in Love? Not in Love?
Not in Love, yes. That's what it was. So thank you. Robbie Renee. Somebody's Husband was by Robbie Renee.
I can read while I write, but I have sometimes a very hard time getting into romance, not because it's like not well written or anything like that. Sometimes I can't get out of my head as the romance author. But yeah, it's just hard sometimes. And so, I just started, and this actually isn't out yet, so I do apologize. But I just started Rosie Dannon's fan service, if you've heard of this book. It is so ridiculous. So it is like this book that's based on this guy who was like, a star in like a show like Teen Wolf. And he's like 42 now, washed up, has been. He played a werewolf when he was like in his 20s. And then all of a sudden, and then the woman, the female character, is like goth troublemaker when she was a teenager, and now she's like a vet. But she used to be a huge in the fandom and like maintained this website that was like an archive of every detail ever spoken on the show. Just a kind of a love letter to fandom. But anyway, he starts becoming a werewolf like he did on the show, like in real life. And he seeks her out to help him figure out what in the hell, sorry, Lord, what is happening to him. And what is happening to him. And it sounds so ridiculous, but I am like all in. Like she does it so wonderfully. So I recommend that book. I think it's out in March, so not too long, but yes.
Questions?
This is a more specific question for Ashley. I know you have Dream On, Ramona Riley coming out. Is there anything you can say about that right now? I know that you published the cover and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the cover's out and the blurb about it is out. So it's the start of a new series that's also set in a small town named after a body of water, because apparently I can't name a small town doesn't have a water name in it. So it's about a woman whose mom left her when she was very young, and she has a much younger sister. And then when she is 18, she leaves for college. She wants to be a costume designer. She goes to Rhode Island to study design, but then her dad gets in a car accident, and she comes back to this small town to help raise her little sister, and that's where she's been for like 12 years, and she's like 30 in the book. And then a romantic comedy movie comes to town to film. It's a queer romantic comedy, actually based on a book by Iris Kelly. If any of y'all have read Iris Kelly. So Iris Kelly makes a little cameo appearance in the part of the book. And so the love interest is named Dylan Monroe, and she's the star of this romantic comedy, who I loosely based on Frances Bean Cobain if Kurt had never committed or died by suicide. I felt like that was a little heavy for romance, but I wanted to like kind of explore this dynamic of like, okay, what if you are a kid of two 90s rock icons who had this wild, life while you were in your formative years. So that's kind of what she's based on. And they collide and, things happen. So it's really one of my favorite books I've written. So yeah, I'm writing the second one right now. So yeah.
Questions? I can run to the back, you guys. Don't hesitate to ask.
Hi. I'm just curious about your process. Like if you're a pantser, a plotter, or plantser.
I'm a pantser. The idea, the characters will come to me, and I'll know the general idea of what I want the story. Like, I know the purpose of the story. Everything I write has purpose. So I'll know what the purpose is, and I'll know who the characters are, and then I just let them do their thing.
So how did you get to the purpose?
So it just comes to me. So like if I know, like I knew that the purpose of Curvy Girl Summer was to set your boundaries, to not settle. Don't let society's idea about you and your body dictate what you will accept and allow in your life. And then all the other things that happened in that book. So I knew that I was writing that story, but I didn't know how it was all gonna play out until I wrote it. And so just allowing, sometimes that can take a long time. I can't ever call it. Like sometimes it'll be like, oh, I can finish this in a month and a half. That's no problem. And then other times it'll be a little bit longer than that because I have to wait for them to start. Because if I start saying, okay, this is what I want to happen next, sometimes it'll start feeling forced and it's not organically letting them do their thing. And so I just let them take the wheel.
Oh, lucky.
I'm a bit of a plantser, so I definitely don't like do detailed outlines and detailed plotting because I do like to kind of let the characters dictate what's happening. So I usually start with kind of a situation or a premise mixed with characters. And then kind of all of that comes from just like a million different things going on in my brain. And but a lot of, it's all really rooted to me in like what my character's wound is. Like what is their ghost that they're kind of carrying around? What needs to be, what do they need, how do they need to grow? What do they need to face about themselves? And that's kind of like purpose, you know, like that kind of sets that for me. And that really dictates a lot. Like, you know, I had one character named Delilah Green who, her parents both died when she was young. She was raised by a stepmother who didn't love her. Kind of based on Cinderella is where I got the first inspiration for that. But, you know, everything she did from that point is based on that experience. Like she's snarky, how she reacts to people's jokes, how she reacts to her sister-in-law, her stepsister. You know, so I'm really character driven in that way. And then I usually write like a really long synopsis, everything I can think of that could possibly happen from beginning to end. So I do think about like, if there is a third act breakup, how am I gonna do it? If there's not, what will happen? Like when will they first kiss? When will they first do more than kissing? When is all that gonna happen? Because that just helps me like face the page every day and not be like, oh my gosh, it's blank and I have no idea what I'm doing. It always changes as I'm writing, but it just kind of helps me have a structure.
I have a couple of more questions, and we have a few more minutes. Okay, so the one thing I love about both of your books is that you write explicit, spicy, steamy scenes. If somebody was looking for something comparative to the levels of heat that you write, who would you recommend? Like, where do we go next? This is after we finish your entire backlist and everything you are going to write in the future as well, but who else do we read?
Each book I'm writing seems to be getting a little steamier with the exception of Make the Season Bright because they get snowed in. They didn't plan for it to happen, and so there's just no real room for like, some kink. But anyway, like, so it is dictated by the story, but I would definitely say like Alexandria Bellefleur. Like if you haven't read her, maybe, who else am I thinking of? I'm so visual, I need like a list of authors in front of me. Yeah, it's really hard for me to pull them out of my hat. Rosie Dannon is probably kind of on the same kind of spice level as well. So, yeah.
I know Tati Richardson writes extra spicy stuff. She's sitting right here.
She's in the front row.
Well, hello.
Say hi, Tati.
Adriana Herrera writes amazing queer and Latina stuff, so I just love it.
Okay, I guess one last question, and this is about research. because even though you write contemporary, there's always something, to look up. In your latest books, what is the most eccentric or odd thing that you discovered or that you learned while doing research for your books? Oh yeah, sorry, this is like 2-3 books ago. Or most recently, what you've researched and found to be really interesting.
The last thing I researched, I don't feel comfortable discussing.
Understood.
But I will say that in Curvy Girl Summer, there was an accident, and then I had to research I had to look at how the accident happened, and then what the injuries would have been, and all of that, and so I feel comfortable saying that.
Thank you.
I don't know, I've had to look up stuff about cameras and how they work and how you would add filters and what, not on Instagram filter, and how kind of all that would work. I think the most recent thing I've did that was interesting was I'm writing someone who's trying to do a bartending gig, but she has never bartended in her life. So I had to look up a bunch of drink recipes, and which kind of lead you down rabbit holes of really interesting drinks that I've never heard of and cocktails, and it's just kind of fun to discover stuff. There's a pickle cocktail. You've ever heard of that? Dill pickle martini. I'm
I don't drink, and so anytime my characters drink, I'm always like, does this taste good? And then I have to text my friends what do you think about this? Is this a good? And so, yeah.
All right, you guys, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for your time. I know you guys lead very busy lives, and you guys do a lot. Thank you so much for writing. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. They really mean a lot to us. Obviously, as you can see, we are here. If you don't have their books and you're interested in buying them, they are at Eagle Eye Bookshop. I do work there, so it is a very shameless plug. We are right outside. If you go straight outside the sanctuary, we're the first bookstore on the left. If you have your books and you're ready to get them autographed, you're going to go out and take a left and then take another left. And let's give them a few minutes to get situated and get comfortable before we bum rush them. But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.